So in this session, we're going to be looking at Azure DevOps, semantic versioning, using GitVersion to achieve semantic versioning, and especially with a focus around Docker images and tags around Docker, and how we would manage the workflow in Azure DevOps to be able to release a specific image to production, staging, or UAT environments. So what are we going to be learning today? First, we're going to create an example.NET Core 5 MVC application with Docker. Then we're going to go into Azure DevOps, create a new project. We're going to set up Azure Container Registry and a service principal. And then we're going to be creating a self-hosted build server. So if you want to know how to do that, look out for that section. Then in Azure DevOps, we're going to create the build pipelines. We're going to create a web app in Azure using the Docker image for the MVC application. And then we're going to have a look at the semantic versioning, Git version, how it looks on our local machine and on Azure DevOps, and how we can set up a release pipeline to use the Git versioning or the semantic versioning to choose what we want to do for the various environments. So let's have a look at creating a demo application. So DemoMVC, and what we want to do here is enable Docker. We'll use .NET 5. I don't want authentication, and I do want a Linux Docker image. Doesn't really matter. It's just easier to run it on Linux than on a Windows install. And let's just create it. So while we're waiting for it to create, we will be focusing more on how the semantic versioning works rather than any specific aspect like Docker or installing Docker, and then also the whole chain, how to set it up on Azure DevOps. Okay, so let's have a look at the application. So we can start the application. We'll run it in a Docker image or from the Docker image. There we go. Okay, great stuff. So our application is working, and now let's see how we can get the application running on Azure, and also how we would set up Azure DevOps to deploy this application. So the next section will be what we are going to be requiring on the Azure portal. So we're in the Azure portal, and we're going to be creating quite a couple of things just to hook everything up together. And one of the first things we'll do is to create an Azure Container registry. So we can go to Containers and Container Registry. Just click on that. Okay, so we'll create a new resource group, and we'll call it Learn DevOps. Okay, and the registry, we'll call it Learn DevOps. Great stuff. I'm just going to put it in the location closest to me, which is North Europe. Standard. I think everything else is fine. Review and create. And let's just create it. Now, while it's creating, while this process is happening, we'd also like to create a service principal to connect to it. So that's one of the first things we'd like to do. So we're going to go to our Active Directory. And if you scroll away, you can have a look here. It says the deployment's complete. So we can just go here to get back to it, the top. So app registrations, we are going to do a new registration, and we'll just call it SP for service principal, Learn DevOps. Okay, and we can register it. There's really very little around this. I need the application ID, which I'm going to copy, and I'm going to put that in my notepad. So let's just get here. So I'm going to put that in my notepad. So this is the client ID. And I'm going to delete all these things when I'm done, so it doesn't really matter. And the secret. So when I go to certificates and secrets, I'm going to create a new client secret. I will call it client secret. And we'll add it. And then I'll copy the secret and paste it here, and I'll be using it in a little while. So what we then do once the service principal was created, we actually want to give it access to the container registry. So what we will be doing is we'll go to resource groups, we'll go to Learn DevOps. We'll see the container registry is there, Learn DevOps, and it's quite simple. We'll just go to the access control, and then we will add a role assignment. So we would like to do contributor, and then this SP Learn DevOps. Okay, so SP Learn DevOps, the service principal for Learn DevOps, was added here. Okay, and then the next thing we'd like to do. So there's a couple of things we'd like to do in this Learn DevOps resource group. So we've got our container registry. We would also like to create a build server, so just a small virtual machine that we can set up for our build. With this demo, Azure DevOps, it was just a little bit easier to create your own build server. It's also great to learn how to do a self-hosted one. So let's quickly add a virtual machine. So we'll just do an Ubuntu server. So we could say our build server, put it in the same location, North Europe. I don't want any redundancy. The image is fine. The size, maybe a little bit bigger. So I think I like this one. Let's just see what the pricing is. I think it was this one that I'd like to use, this B1S1. It's kind of not very expensive, and we can use that one, so let's just select that, and we'll do a password for us here. Okay. Okay, we'd like the ports to be open. I'm not really worried about disks or networking. What I would like is for this thing just to switch off. So the auto shutdown, I'm very happy with the auto shutdown. So if I forget to switch it off by later today at 7 p.m., it will switch off the virtual machine and not incur any extra cost for running it. Okay. And let's create it. So while it's creating the virtual machine, I don't want to save the password. Great stuff. So that is in progress. We also would like to create something that will host the Docker container. But before we get there and create that, let's go to Azure DevOps and we can create our project there. So we've got the project on our local machine, and it is the DemoMVC app. So here's the DemoMVC app, and I'd like to create a project for it in Azure DevOps. So let's just create a new project, and we can call it Learn DevOps. Okay, now in DevOps, we've got the Learn DevOps, which has a default repo. But what we would like to do is for this specific project, which is the DemoMVC, we'd like to create a project. I don't want a README in there. I'm just going to create it. And then what we're going to be doing is just to go to our MVC project, do a git init, link it to the repo in DevOps, git commit -m, it will just be our initial commit. And what should happen is if we try and push it, it's not linked to master. We'll just push it. Okay, so now it's asking me for a password. I have created a personal access token, and little trick in the git config file, you can just replace the personal access token here, save it, and if we do the same command, it should push everything to our repo. Let's just give it a second. Okay, let's just try again. There we go. So let's have a look at the repo. If we refresh it, it's here. Great stuff. Okay, so now one of the things we'd like to do is when we push code here, and we're going to get to the semantic versioning, but we first just want to see how this works. So when we push the code here, what we would like to do is to automatically build this project and then create a Docker image in that Azure Container registry that we've created. So one of the things we need to do under project settings is you look at service connections and you create a service connection, and what you will see here is we want to do a Docker registry. So you can choose an Azure Container registry. However, the issue with it is that it will create a service principal for you. For this exercise, I don't want to, so I'm just going to use Docker Hub, and I'm going to go back to my portal. So let's just have a look here. Home, I've created that resource group. Here's my container registry. And when I look at the container registry, I would like to copy the name of it. Okay. And it just needs to be HTTPS. And then my Docker ID and password is my service principal. Let's just have a look. It is my client ID, it is my user ID, and my password and secret is this. And we can call this Learn DevOps ACR, Azure Container Registry. Okay. Let's just add it. And there we have our Learn DevOps service connection. So now it should be able to connect there. We'll still see if there's anything that we need to configure here. If I remember correctly, I in our container registry, let's just look at access keys. Well, it doesn't matter. I think there's still a setting we would like to do. Let's just see. No, not here. That's fine. Okay, so let's set up the build pipeline in the next section. So next, let's create a pipeline deployment file. So we'll just add this to our project. Add new item. So we just want to add a YAML file. And we would like to call it azure-pipelines.yml. And we're just going to put a comment in here for this section. Okay, and then it's very simple. We'll just do a git add dot git commit -m Azure pipelines added, and we'll push it. There we go. So then when we're back to DevOps, it's quite simple. We can go to our pipelines and we can create a pipeline. So this will be a build pipeline. I like to use the other get because it gives me more options in terms of control over how I create the thing. So okay, so learn DevOps, DemoMVC, continue. I like to do YAML. And this is now the next point where we are at. So I would like to use the build server that I've created. So before we get to that, we can just select the build pipelines file and let's configure the agent pool and create a new agent pool here first. So that should be quite simple to do. We just open another tab here. Okay, and this is a little bit of work. So we can go to the Learn DevOps. Let's just see if it's under agent pools. And there's an Azure Pipelines one. I would like to add a pool. It's going to be self-hosted, and I'm going to call it Learn DevOps agent pool. And then quite simply here, we'd like to add a new agent. And it is relatively simple. So let's do the following. So we're going to go back to our portal and we see in the resource group, we've got a virtual machine, which is our build server. And we should be able to connect to it. So let's just copy this to the clipboard for the moment. I'm going to open my Linux subsystem for Windows and I'm going to do an SSH. And I think it was Azure Admin that I created there. Okay, let's have a look if I can log in. Yes, there I'm logged in. Okay, so it's very simple. I will just follow the installation instructions here. So we're going to first download the Azure agent. So we just do a wget. It's downloaded, so there it sits, and then it's very simple. we just make a directory. And then we can modify this command a little bit because it looks a little bit different. Because it's just in that main folder there. Okay, and then we can configure it. So the next step is to run config, as you see here. So we'll just do /config. Okay, yes. So the server URL is quite simple. It's this part. It's your DevOps URL. We will use a personal access token. We've already generated a personal access token. Let me just grab it. Okay. So the agent pool is learn DevOps agent pool. And this will be my build server. Well, can just keep it the same as what it is. We'd like the work folder to be the same. Okay, great stuff. So now the agent is there, and I think what we would like to do is just see. So we've done the configure. Let me just see. Okay, so what we're going to do now is run it as a service. And we'd like to install it. And let's check the status. And let's start it. And let's check the status. Okay, so it's running. And now the build server is installed and the agent is installed, so Azure DevOps can talk to this build server. However, there's quite a couple of things missing still on here. So one of the first things we'd like to do is just install the .NET framework. So we'll do that in the next section. Okay, so we're going to install the .NET framework in a second. So if we look at agents, we can see our build server is there and it's busy. So let's just see .NET framework latest version. Let's just do. Okay, so let's just have a look here. And what we would like to do is just do the latest version of the SDK. Desktop, so let's just look at Linux. We're on Ubuntu, so there's just a couple of steps to follow here. Let's just scroll down to Ubuntu. There we go. Install.NET on Ubuntu. And the first thing to do is this adds a package source to it. So we go back here. Great stuff. And then we can just copy the installation instructions here. It's very simple to install the stuff on Ubuntu. So it's actually so easy to set up your own build server. Just give it a second. Yeah, so it's the latest version of the runtime. Our Azure agent is installed. We'll probably install a little bit of PowerShell as well, but let's just first see how far we get with what we've done here. Okay, so let's just see what's happened here. So we could go .NET -v minus version should give us, okay, great stuff. So the latest version of .NET's installed. Okay, so we want to build Docker images. Docker has not been installed yet, so let's do the next step. Install Docker on Ubuntu 20.04. And this should be quite quick as well. So very simple. Let's just install Docker. The second step, once it's installed, is just to run it automatically. So let's just give it a moment. And then to give the user access to Docker. It's always fun to wait for stuff while it's installing. So let's run Docker automatically, and then the next is just to make sure your user, which is the Azure admin user in this instance, actually can run the Docker without any problems. And what we would do as well is we just log in and log out. So okay, and Docker is installed. Great stuff. Okay, so we've got the Azure agents installed, we've got Docker installed, and let's get back to our build pipelines. We've selected our azure-pipelines.yml file, and all that's looking great. Let's just change the pipeline. Okay, so we may need to refresh this. We may need to recreate it. Let's just see, because I haven't saved it. Or have I? Oh yes, there we go. So, and let's just choose the YAML file again. I don't want to start a build, I just want to save it because I want to edit the file. If you go to pipelines, what you will then see is our Learn DevOps is here. We can edit it. Great stuff. So what we'll do here, we'll set up our triggers, and we'll just say for the moment just the master branch. Maybe we want to include. There we go. So including the master branch. And then the next step is to add jobs. So what we would call this is build and test DemoMVC, and there's some variables we'd like in here. I'm not very fond of this editor, but so solution that we'd like to build is everything with a .sln extension. The build platform is going to be any CPU. And we'll see why we use this a little bit later. And the build configuration will just be release. And then we would like to add a task. So that's the jobs. Let's add some steps. And the task we'd like to add here is a Docker 2 task. And our inputs, a container registry is going to be our container registry. So the reference to it, if we look at our service connections, it's just learn DevOps ACR. Okie dokie. The repository will be called DemoMVC. Okay, command will be build and push. And our Docker file, we can specify it as Docker file. And the tags, what I am going to be doing here is just a latest tag. Okay, so let's save it. And once we save it, because that trigger is set there, it should now start and try to build it. Now there may be some errors and we'll go along and see what's the problem. So we're just going to give this a moment to run and then we'll see if there's anything we need to debug. Okay, so let's just see how we would debug this. There was an error as we expect. It says somehow it's unhappy about the Docker daemon, but it may be the context in which the service was running. So there's a couple of ways to do this. A very simple thing is just to reboot it. Just give it a couple of seconds and we're back. And then we'll run it again. We could also probably have stopped and started the Azure agent. But it's just to make sure that everything is filtered through. So let's just have a look if we can connect again. There we go. And let's just see if we can run the pipeline again. May yet be another type of problem. Run pipeline. Let's have a look. It's doing our Git, Docker, there we go. There's lots of little things that sometimes go wrong, but the context in which stuff will run changes. So when this is complete, and we'll see if there's more errors, it's very possible that there'll be an error when it tries to push the image. It's kind of the way you deal with doing stuff in DevOps. You start from one side, get issues, and you resolve them until it works. So we'll continue in a second when this is done. Okay, well, it seemed to have done what it needed to do. So we'll go back to Azure, and in our Learn DevOps or our container registry, we'll have a look at repositories, and we should have our DemoMVC there. And if we click on it, there should be a tag latest. Okay, great stuff. So then what we'd like to do is actually host. So there's a variety of ways to host this. I mean, we can pull the image and host it on our local host. We can run it in a Kubernetes, micro Kubernetes or full Kubernetes cluster, or we can host it as a web app in Azure, which is what I want to do now. I usually use Kubernetes, but just for the purposes of what we're trying to do here, is let's host that Docker image and see if we can get it working. And then we're going to update the Docker image from DevOps. So, but first let's just say we want to create a web app. There we go. I would like it in the same resource group, and I'm going to call the website demo. Well, let's just call it, yeah, let's call it DemoMVC. Okay, Learn DevOps. Let's just call it Learn DevOps. I want a Docker container, Linux. I want North Europe again. Let's just keep everything in the same zones. There's the Docker image. Let's just leave everything kind of standard. Okay, so it's a single container, an Azure Container registry. So let's just do Learn DevOps. Okay, so what we need to do is in the container registry, there's an authentication section. So let's do that in another instance of my portal. So I'm just going to close these things. We should get into the portal. And if I go to my container registry, so there we have the container registry. We may need to open that link, so it's not very difficult. I don't believe it's under access control. It could have been. No. Security. If I remember correctly, it's somewhere here. Well, let's have a look. It doesn't really matter. So we have the following. So https docs.microsoft.com US Azure Container Registry Container Registry admin account. So let's just have a look at what we need to do. So it's under access keys, and we have to enable it there. So access keys, and I just want to enable the admin user. It's going to generate some stuff. Okay, I don't think I need to copy anything. And then when I'm back here, let's just have a look. Yes, I can choose my image. I don't want any startup command. Let's just see monitoring tags. I think I just want to go ahead and create it. Okay, so while it is busy creating this, we'll come back when it's done, and then we'll just test that the website actually works. So it says the deployment is complete. Just go to the resource, and if all went well, we should be able to open a link. And if we test our app, we have our DemoMVC app running. So the Docker image is in the container registry. Now, what this whole training is about is, if I look at my container registry, where is it? So I'm in the container registry here, and if I click on DemoMVC, I have this latest tag here. But for semantic versioning, this is a little bit inconvenient. I would like a 1.0.0 and maybe a build number behind it, or a 1.0.0 and it's a feature branch, or a develop branch, or a release branch, or a hotfix, whatever the semantic versioning I want to do in here. And I want to drive it all from the Azure pipelines and the releases here. So this is what we'll be setting up next. So really the next thing to look at is semantic versioning, and the thing we want to use for semantic versioning is called GitVersion. It is very simple to install, so let's look at that in the next section. Okay, so we'll go to usage, command line, and installation. This is a bit an odd place. I would have had a installation maybe separate, but doesn't really matter. And we'll see how the command line works here. So you can do a .NET tool -g list, I think. The -g must be at the end. Okay, so it isn't installed, and if I try and install it, I am most likely going to get an error because I've got some NuGet packages that is interfering with it. It's saying what it is there. It's very simple to fix this. So what we'll do is we'll just open an Explorer and we'll just do app data. Oops. We'll go to app data, we'll go to NuGet. You may not have this error if you just have the vanilla stuff in there. And then it's very simple. I am just going to bring my feed over. There's a couple of feeds I have here for Blazor components that I don't want. I'll save it. We'll try and rerun it. And then when we finish running it, I'll just add it again so it's installed. I'll just undo that. Okay, so now if I run the to list, I should get that. And if I do a get version, so it's .NET get version, it should probably give me an error. No, it doesn't. Okay. So it's just saying it's the semantic version is 0.1.0. Okay, so now GitVersion is installed on my local, and there's a bunch of configuration stuff we'll go through. So let's just first run an init. It should create a file for me. So let's just do the getting started, and I like the GitFlow, which we'll discuss. So I think what we would like here is possibly the continuous delivery. And if I then go back to my folder, so I'm in documents, Cornell, and it is DemoMVC. And it should have created a GitVersion.yml file for me. Well, we can just have a look in here, and it will say continuous delivery. The next thing we'd like to do is to actually install GitVersion on Azure DevOps. So let's look at how we would do that. Okay, so we in DevOps again, we are going to go to kind of the root so that we get the organization settings, and then we'll see there's extensions, and we'd like to browse the marketplace, and it's under Get Tools. This is the one we'd like to install. It's in the documentation, so if we go to Git version, it's either here or in the build servers. When you look at Azure DevOps, it gives a description here of what needs to be done to install it, but we'll dive into that in a second. So let's just go back here, browse the marketplace. And get it free. Okay, so if I go back to my organization and I go to extensions, I should see GitTools here. Great stuff. Okay, so now if I go back to my pipeline and I have my whole build pipeline here, what I'd like to do is to go get tools or get version. Yeah, so after some playing around with it, there's 2 steps to getting Git version working here. So first we need to set it up, which is a bit odd. I think we can just do a 5.x. Let's get to align this. There we go. We don't want to include the pre-release, and then we'd like to execute it. We would like to specify a configuration file which is called GitVersion.yml. And I think that's it. It's also going to mess this up. Let's just fix the spacing here. There we go. Inputs. Okay. So once this is configured, I'm not going to save it right now. I want to change the tags here. So the tag, if we go to Git version, there's some variables that's available once Git version is set up. So let's just have a look at that. So there's Git version. So 5.x is fine. And what we would like to do is to use this one. So one of these ones, let's just see, Git's version is full symmetric, full same version. Maybe that's the one we'd like to use there. Let's just have a look. Okay, so let's just go back here. So this will probably let's just do this. semantic version save. Let's see if it builds. Can just follow the process here. So it's just making sure that GitVersion is installed for us, and it's using the latest version, so 5.x. Okay, so it's not finding the Git version tool because we haven't pushed it yet. So what we can do here is git branch -a. Great stuff. We've got the master branch, git add dot. Okay, so we'll just do a git pull and then a push, and hopefully everything should be updated. Let's have a look. Git version YAML added. Okay, so now it should find that file, generate the version for us. I think it's still going to be unhappy, and I'll show you now why. I may have the wrong variable, but okie dokie. Great stuff. So this same version is fine, but okie dokie, I've got the wrong variable. So let's just look what the correct variable is. Okay, so to see what the correct format of that is, it's $GitVersion dot, and then depending on what you'd like to access. So let's just go to the tags here, and we can just do sem version. Let's just save it, and it should run. Let's just have a look at if it is now going to output that correct version for me. Okie dokie, I think it's a little bit more happy now. So when the Docker image has finished building, we should be able to see in my container registry and this is still busy building, I think. Let's just give it a bit of time. So when this is done, we'll just have a look if it created that tag for me there. Oh wait, yes, there we go. So refresh, and great stuff. I have the 010. Now what you'll notice here is, okay, so this is all good and well. I can use this version. What happens if I make a change to my code now? So we're going to look at deploying it in a moment, but I just want to have a look at these numbers. So we can do a git pull because we made some changes, and then let's just do a in the view, just a very basic change. Let's just add a welcome call now, and if I now do a .NET Git version, let's just fix that. I will see that my semantic version is still 010. In general, it depends on what I want to do here. I think let's just for the moment leave it like this. We can obviously see that there's been a change there, but the idea is that I then tag it. So I go git tag, and I will call it 0.1.1, and then I can do a git dot git commit -m small change, and I can push it. Okay, and it should rebuild now, which we will have a look at in a second. So we'll see if that version has arrived here. So we'll just go back to pipelines. It should be building. And let's just give it a second to see when it's done. We'll continue. Okay, so let's just have a look if the new version was built. It didn't, so there may have been a little mistake. Semantic version is that 012. Okay, so a nice little problem there is that even though I've created the tags, it doesn't automatically push the tags to the master branch. And now that it has, let's have a look if it's rebuilding. Yes, we can just run it again. Okay, so let's just run a new one. So what is the situation now is it actually overwrote that 010 tag for me. So let's just see when this is done. So if I look at this, so my git version, hello. Yeah, there we go. So I can see git version ran and now it's the correct tag. It's incremented it because I've made some changes. It's okay. And if I then go to my Docker repository, I can see that it was created there. And of course, I can then go to my actual app service where I'm hosting my apps, and this hasn't updated. So if we just run it, it'll be that again, and we can obviously go and select a container for it. But I would like to automate this process from DevOps. So what we'll do next is we'll go to releases and create a new release pipeline. We can just go with an empty template. So if we go to the artifacts, we'll just select this one, and I don't want to do the default version or the latest. I want to select the one. So we can specify it. Okay, then we can add it. And then what we'd like to do here, we can run this from our own hosted environment as well. We can add a web app. Let's just see. let's just see, app service. Just want to get the correct one. So I definitely think we want to do the Azure WebApp for containers. Let's just add it and let's see if this is the one we want. Okay, great stuff. So it's asking me which subscription. Let's just authorize it. Just give that a moment. Okay, it's done. Learn DevOps. And now I want to specify the image. I think I need to specify the full image in the following manner. So let's just go to our container registry, our repositories, DemoMVC. I think it's DemoMVC, and then the tag, let's just do latest for a moment. We might need to specify the full thing. I'm not going to choose a slot. I think that's all fine. Let's just save it. And then if I go to the release pipeline, let's just see how that would potentially work. So it'll ask me which one I want to do. So now you'll see that where one of the problems comes in is this version that's created here is using actually the build version. So once you can see this is what was automatically generated, which is not very ideal, but it's still a little bit nicer than this +5. And this is what we'll fix next. So I can't specify a plus in the Docker tag, and therefore I can see which build it was, but I'd like to modify the build pipeline so that this works a bit better. So let's do that. So in order to change the build number there a little bit, because unfortunately we can't from that drop down get the values from Git version, so we have to fiddle with it a bit. So we're going to install PowerShell on Ubuntu. Okay, so let's just see. I just want to go to the latest Ubuntu or to the one that I'm on. I can just copy that. It's relatively straightforward. It's really simple to install stuff on Ubuntu or any Linux distro for that matter. Okay, so when this is done, we'll quickly make the changes. So what I'm proposing we do, so if we look at the release pipeline, so while that thing is busy there, if I want to create a release, is that I'd like to take this full semantic version. So if you look at what it's actually using here, it's using this full semantic version, and which is the build version. And I'd like to change the 0, 1, 2, +1 to potentially a -1 or an _1. So it doesn't really matter. Let's just see how we would do that. So this is done. I'm going to just do a reboot so that I make sure everybody is happy with the context. Great stuff. So while this is rebooting, let's go and update the build pipeline to generate a more suitable number for us. Okay, so it's quite simple. So after git version runs, so let's just have a look at what it does here, because this is important to try and figure this out. So we go to learn DevOps. Let's just have a look at the last run. And if I go to git version, you'll see it runs git version here. It gets this full semantic version, and it's updating the build number to 01.2 plus 1. And this is what we're getting as the option to select for the release. But we can't create a Docker tag that has a plus in it. So I'm using the semantic version, but what I would like to actually generate is the full semantic version, but replace the plus with something. And I didn't find something very easy to do it, but in terms of configuration, maybe there is, but pretty simple. We'll just run a PowerShell script. It's so configurable, everything. So let's just edit this. And it's very simple. So after git version runs, we'll just add a PowerShell, and the PowerShell is quite simple. So let's just add this little thing there, and now everything underneath here will be fine. So what we want to do is we want to say, so to create a variable in PowerShell, you just put a dollar in front of it. We'll say our build number is equal to the environment, and that's what it looks like. So the build number is defined like that. Then in the next line, what we'd like to do is to change the build number, and we're going to reference that variable. So once we reference the variable, so we're just going to set it equal to itself, but we're going to do a replace. And replace is very simple. We're just going to replace the plus with a minus. It doesn't really matter. And then to actually update the variable, the build number to come out, we want to do a write host, which is a command for updating it, and the format of it is something like this, ##. So we want to say the build dot update build number, and we want to set it to our build number. So what this 3 lines of code does, it gets the current build number, which has a plus, and replaces the plus with a minus, and then just updates the environment so that the build number gets in there. And then what we'd like to do is, instead of using the semantic version, we would like to use the build dot build number. Okay, so then what's happened is we've updated it here, we're using it here. If we save it, it will run. And let's have a look at what it outputs. So there it goes. It's pulling the latest version. It's running this. And there's an issue here. I have to fix something here. I probably didn't get, I probably have a typo in there. Let's quickly have a look. That's all right. PowerShell is right. Let's just see if there's anything that needs to happen here. Oh yes, of course. I just want to make sure it's in the same line. And if everything needs to always be aligned in YAML files, let's see if we run it again. Okay, so everything is happy there. Let's see what our output is now. PowerShell is ran. So if we look at Git version, we'll see it's set it to 0.1.2 plus 3, and then now we do a -3. We'll see in a moment if that's happy. Docker, and let's go have a look at our container registry, repository. Okie dokie, let's just give it a second to finish. Okay, so now we have 0.1.2-3, and if I go to the releases, I can create a release. I can select my -3. So this is now valid Docker version information as well, because this now aligns with what I have in Docker. So let's just see if this is happy. So there may be some other errors that still come in. Let's just have a look. And we'll continue in a second when this is done. Okay, so it thinks it has succeeded. We want to go back to our app service. So this is what it looked like. Let's just see if it actually deployed it. And there's an application error that we need to sort out. So this is a typical thing that happens here. Let's just open it and see what it's unhappy about. I may need to replace the minus with an underscore, or there may be something still missing. This can take you a while to sort out. This is why I'm doing this training here. Okay, so let's just have a look at, so it still wasn't working there. So if I actually go to the release just to see what the potential error is, I am deploying a hard-coded latest version here. What I would like to do is go in here and just get the build number and update the release pipeline. Okay, so let's see if this is more happy. And well, let me just make sure it is actually that. So the build number or the version, let's just try again, create, and let's have a look at what it is trying to deploy. Okay, so it succeeded. And what we'd like to see here is that the 012-3 was there, and let's just see if we refresh this. There's still an application error. Let's see what that is now. And we'll debug this for a little while until we find the solution. Okay, so just to get the deployment to work, do not put an HTTPS in front of that. It just needs to be the container registry, and then we want the build number in there. So once that is configured like that, what we'll do now is we'll do a release, but let's first do a code change. So let's just do a git pull here just to get the latest stuff, and we'll just do a major update, and we'll just make this a bit smaller, and we can have a look at the Azure pipelines. I wanted to make it a minus. Okay, so we could just say get dot get commit minus m major update, and then we can do a .NET Git version just to see what it would be like. So it's going to be the full, so 0.1.2, and then we can do a git tag 0.1.3, and we'll just push everything there. So let's have a look at the pipeline. Once the pipeline is completed, we should see our image in the repository. Let's have a look where we are. It's checking stuff out. This is our Azure Container registry. I'm going to take the latest one out here. I don't want it there. And let's just have a look at where Docker is. So we should have something that's 0.1.3. Perfect. There's no extra. We shouldn't in general have any extra patches or anything extra there. It just makes it possible for us to track this master branch very nicely. It's just building everything for us. Create stuff. It's basically finished. So 0.1.3, and if we refresh, we should see 0.1.3 here. If I go to my app, it's not automatically deploying, so I should still see the welcome Cornell. And if I go to my releases, I can now release the latest version. And once this is completed, I should be able to open the application. Okay, so let's have a look. If we now open it, my major update is shown in here. So the whole point of this training session was to be able to go into releases, create a release, and then select the version that you would like to release. You can also revert back to previous versions. We can also automate some of the releases to deployment, testing or staging slots. But for the moment, let's look at what will happen when we have a different set of branches, so that when a develop branch or a feature branch comes in, which is what we want to do with GitFlow, that it's very nicely marked here, and that we know what's going on. So quite simple. So we can do .NET get version init again, and what I would like to do is to do branch specific configuration. So let's go to 4. I want to configure my develop branch, and I would like to tag it with develop, and we can just increment it per commit. Let's go back. I'd also like to create some feature branch configurations, and we'll just call it feature, and then we can save the config. So if I then do a get version, nothing much should have changed. Okay, and then I can do a get branch -a. I can do a get branch develop. So let's just check out the develop, and if I do a get version here, you still see the same thing. So say we make a change in our develop branch, and we can just call it develop in progress. And then what I'd like to do, so this is all good, so develop in progress. I want to take the so let's just do the Azure pipelines. Git dot commit -m. Okay, so git checkout master, and the reason I want to do that is I just want to have a look at the Azure pipelines and add some branches. So I want my develop branch to also build, and I want feature / let's just call it Cornell test to also build. So if I now push this, and we can say that it is build pipeline updates, git push, great stuff, and git checkout develop. Let's just merge master into it, and we can do a git push, and I would like to push it to the server, and let's just have a look at my pipelines. I should hopefully have 2 here. Yes, so there my develop branch is building, and we're going to see in a second what it should look like. So if I do a get version for this develop branch, my full semantic versioning will have this develop tag in it, and then whatever commit I'm on. So let's just see if that's actually going to generate properly. Okay, so now we've built this branch. Let's just have a look. So if we just click on it, I like to investigate what's happened here. So if I go to my PowerShell side, you'll see this is the tag that it's created, and if I refresh here, I'll have a develop container image that's been created, and that's great because now I can actually deploy that. So it will be the same with the feature branches. So if we say, for example, git branch minus a. So I want to create a new feature branch, git branch feature slash, I think it's the slash feature, and just let's call it Cornell test. I think it's maybe the forward slash, it doesn't really matter. Okay, it's not a valid branch name, it will be that one. Okay, so that answers that question. Let's just use the correct version of it there, and then we can do git. So let's just do a git branch minus a. So we're in the develop branch. Let's just do a git add dot for that little change. A git commit minus m update build pipeline for features, and git checkout feature Cornell test, and then just do a git merge develop in here. Okay, so that should all be happy. And now for my feature branch, I am going to make a change and Cornell test feature work in progress. Okay, so if we then do a git add dot and a git commit minus m feature edit 1, and then I can do a git push. Okay, so git branch minus a. Let's just pull everything through. So we're going to say git checkout develop git merge feature and git checkout okay, so then we can do a git tag list let's just see. So git tag, yes. I don't want the list tag there. I want to tag it as 0.1.4. Git. So let's just quickly push that. Where's that little thing? Okay, so let's just do a git push, and then we'll push the tags in a second. Okay, so let's just push the tags as well, and I think everything's up to date. Let's just have a look at what we have on our build side. Okay, so I have my master branches there. I just want to see what the pipelines look like. Okay, that's correct. So let's just do this again. git checkout develop. Okay, git checkout feature kernel test. Let's just see. Okie dokie. So let's just update the pipeline. Git push. And let's push this remote branch there. And let's have a look if it builds now. Okay, so what should happen now is we should have a feature branch that's created. So if we do .NET Git version, we shall see that a feature branch was created for kernel test. So if we look at the full version, it's feature, and maybe this isn't completely ideal, so we'll have a look at configuring this in a second. And I would like to have feature with my branch name in it. So what you typically do is the following. So we go to our Git version file and we can have something like this. We can save it. Let's just see if that comes in now. So if I look at my full version, okay, /feature/kernel test, and I can see the build version that I'm in there. Okay, so git add dot commit name feature branch update, git push, and git checkout develop, git merge feature kernel test, git push, okay, git checkout master, and git merge develop, and git push. And we just want to make sure everything is still fine. Yes, and we should have a whole host of builds that have now kicked off. So we see developers building, the feature testers building, and master. When they're all done building, we should have a tag for each in our repo, and we'll look at that when we're back. Okay, so now that these three branches have built, we should be able to see precisely where we are. And immediately when I see a 015-3, I know I haven't tagged it, so it's strictly not correct. And what I'm more after is something like this, 013 for my main branch. I don't want to see the dashes there. This is just for me to be able to choose them. And if I then want to deploy this develop or feature branch, I can do so, and it's quite convenient. So if I then go back to pipelines, and I have my releases, I can edit it. Let's just call this demo app. Maybe demo app production. And I can save it. And what we can of course do here is that we use deployment slots. So we can set up two different release pipelines. It's also possible to set up workflow with a release pipeline so only certain people can do releases to production. And that's kind of the reason why we went through all of this. So in general, we would have like a production and maybe a staging or a testing. And if we do a create release, we can select it, but only certain people will be able to select the, so say we wanted to do the feature release and we wanted to release it. Now we're releasing to production, but the principle is the same with those staging slots. And we'll have a look now what we have there. So if we go here, we'll see the major update is there. And when this is done, which we'll see in a moment, we'll see my feature releases in there. Okay, so the deployment has just succeeded. And if I refresh here, I can see my development in progress. I did the feature release, so let's just see if we're in here again. Get branch -a. So let's just check out my feature kernel test. Okay, so let's just go to the So I just wanted to make sure because I might have lost some of the stuff. Get dot and we'll just push it. So what should happen now is if we're back at our DevOps, so does everything is up to date. Let's just have a look. And let's just see what we have here. That's all there. I'm in my master branch. Get branch -a. I think it may be case sensitive. Let's just have a look. So just as a last little bit of an exercise, let's just go to our web app and we'll just have a look at the deployment slots, and let's just select 2 more slots. So I want a develop slot. And I'd also like to create a feature slot, and we'll quickly assign them for the 2 types of releases we'd like to do. So what we should be able to do is go to the release pipelines here. We'd like to clone it. So demo dev, and we'd like to set the slot to develop, and we'll do the exact same thing. That's develop, save it. Okay, and then we can create another slot called feature. So that's feature Cornell, and we can do the exact same thing here under the releases. We can clone it, and we can call this feature Cornell, and save it. Okay, and then it's pretty cool. So what we can then go do is go to releases. So we can go to develop, create a release, and say, okay, I want this develop guy in there. And then for my feature, I'm going to do the exact same thing. I'm going to do feature Cornell test, and then for my production I want to revert back to an older version. So let's just go back to one of these older versions. And once all these things have been deployed, I think it's just waiting a bit because it's queued. It's busy with this guy. Let's just have a look. Then when we're in the slots, we can have a look at all these. So that is our normal slot. Deployment slots. Let's just open that again. We can open the develop slot and it should have a different URL. See, it says develop. Yeah, it's the way I did the merging that's a bit odd. It's not quite what I intended there, but that's okay. And if we look at the rest of the releases, the feature one will be done in a second. So let's just close all these things. So I've got my develop, then let's have a look at feature. I think this is still busy deploying. Let's just see. Okay, so production, so features should be ready. Deployment slots. Let's have a look at feature. There we go. So I've got feature, I've got my develop branch, and of course I've got my main branch. Let's just go back here. Is it finished yet? I think it is. And this is my production. So, quick demonstration on how to set up Azure DevOps and actually be able to choose which release number with semantic versioning that you want to release to different environments. So production, feature develop branches using semantic versioning and GitFlow basics. Now you can go and edit the configuration. There's many options, and I recommend you go to the GitVersion website and have a look at all the different types of options that you can have, how the numbering works, what the defaults are, you'll probably find something that you can make work. And together with the couple of how can I say, blocker removers in this video of just how to configure the whole pipeline, and also how to even edit some of the numbers and what you get back, mostly you'll be able to do what you want. Now, we use this in Kubernetes, but whether you're using a app that's run in a web app with a Docker container or micro Kubernetes, it's really very nice if you look at the releases here that you can configure these things to push to on-prem servers or in whatever fashion that you want. And you have so much flexibility in terms of the commands that you can build up. You've got access to the variables, and I think that's kind of the point of all these things. So if you look at this, you have access to this $build number, and it's quite simple. You can have a command in there, you can connect to an on-prem server and run commands and deploy stuff at will. Okay, I hope you enjoyed it. Please click subscribe and click the notification bell so if I put out new videos that you can be notified. Thank you for your support.